The USS Guardian sat anchored off the coast of San Diego, its massive gray hull reflecting the late afternoon sun. On the deck, a group of sailors gathered near the cargo loading area, taking a break from their duties. They were experienced men, most with at least 5 years of service under their belts. Their conversation was casual, filled with the easy banter of people who had worked together long enough to know each other's stories. Lieutenant. Daniel Carter leaned against a metal railing, watching as a small transport boat approached the ship. "Here comes the fresh meat," he said, nodding toward the approaching vessel. "Command said we're getting 3 new crew members today." "About time," Petty Officer First Class Ryan Mitchell replied. "We've been short-staffed since Jackson and Torres transferred out last month. I'm tired of pulling double shifts." Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb stood nearby, arms crossed over his broad chest. At 42 years old, he was the oldest and most experienced of the group. He had seen countless sailors come and go during his 2 decades in the Navy. "Let's hope these new ones are worth something." Last batch couldn't tell a bulkhead from a bilge pump. The transport boat pulled alongside the ship, and the boarding ladder was lowered. The sailors on deck watched with mild interest as the first new arrival climbed aboard. He was a young man, barely out of training, his uniform still crisp and unwrinkled. He saluted awkwardly as he reached the deck. "Seaman Recruit Thompson reporting for duty, sir," he announced nervously. Lieutenant Carter returned the salute. "Welcome aboard, Thompson. Chief Webb will get you sorted out." The second arrival was similar, another young man fresh from basic training. He looked around the massive ship with wide eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the size and complexity of everything around him. Then the third person began climbing the ladder. The sailors on deck barely glanced over, expecting another green recruit. But when the figure reached the top and stepped onto the deck, maybe 5'4" at most, with her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She looked young, possibly in her mid-20s, and she carried a standard Navy duffel bag over her shoulder. Her uniform fit well, but on her small frame, it seemed almost too big. She had a calm expression on her face, neither nervous nor overly confident. Ryan Mitchell elbowed Daniel Carter and whispered, "They sent us a girl?" "Seriously?" Lieutenant Carter frowned slightly. He tried to be professional, but even he felt a twinge of doubt. The USS Guardian was a combat vessel, and life aboard was demanding. The work was physically exhausting, the conditions were often harsh, and the crew needed to function as a cohesive unit under pressure. Could this small woman really handle it? The woman walked forward and saluted sharply. "Petty Officer, Second Class reporting for duty, sir." Her voice was clear and steady, with no trace of uncertainty. Daniel noticed her rank insignia and felt surprise. She wasn't a fresh recruit. She was a Petty Officer, Second Class, which meant she had been in the Navy for at least a few years and had earned her rank through merit. "Welcome aboard," Daniel said, returning her salute. "I'm Lieutenant Carter. This is Chief Webb and Petty Officer Mitchell." He gestured to the other men. "You'll be bunking in the female quarters on Deck 3. Chief Webb will show you the way and get you oriented." "Thank you, sir," she replied, as she followed Chief Webb toward the interior of the ship. The other sailors exchanged glances. The moment she was out of earshot, the comments began. "Did you see how small she is?" Ryan said, shaking his head. "What's she going to do when we need to move heavy equipment? Stand there and look pretty. This is ridiculous." Another sailor named Kevin Harrison added, "We're a combat vessel, not a cruise ship." "What's next? Putting civilians on board." Lieutenant Carter held up his hand. "All right, enough. She's Navy, same as us. She earned her rank, which means she's qualified. Let's give her a chance before we judge." But even as he said it, Daniel had his own doubts. He had served with women before, and some had been excellent sailors. But on a ship like this, where physical strength and endurance were tested daily, size mattered. Could someone that small really pull her weight? Below deck, Chief Webb led the new arrival through the narrow corridors of the ship. The USS Guardian was a maze of passageways, compartments, and ladders. It took weeks for most sailors to learn their way around without getting lost. "What's your name, Petty Officer?" Marcus asked as they walked. "Rodriguez, Chief." "Elena Rodriguez. Where are you transferring from?" "Naval Station Norfolk, Chief." Marcus nodded. Norfolk was a major Navy base on the East Coast. What was your assignment there? Various duties, Chief. I worked in operations for most of my time there. Operations could mean many things, but it usually referred to administrative or logistical work. Marcus felt his skepticism grow. They needed sailors who could handle the physical demands of ship operations, not someone who had been pushing papers in an office. They reached the female quarters, a small compartment with 4 bunks. Currently, only 2 other women were assigned to the USS Guardian, both working in communications and medical. The ship's crew was predominantly male, as most Navy vessels were. "This is your space," Marcus said, gesturing to an empty bunk. "Stow your gear, get settled, and then report to the mess deck at 1800 hours for evening chow. Tomorrow morning, OS 600 hours, you'll begin your duty assignments. Any questions?" "No, Chief. Thank you." Marcus left her to unpack. As he walked back through the corridors, he found himself wondering about this Alina Rodriguez. She seemed professional enough, but that didn't mean much. Plenty of sailors looked good on paper but couldn't handle real Navy work. That evening in the mess hall, Lena sat alone at a table, eating her dinner quietly. The mess hall was crowded, filled with sailors eating, talking, and decompressing after a long day of work. She noticed the glances in her direction, the whispered conversations. She had experienced this before at every new assignment. Being a woman in the Navy meant constantly proving yourself, constantly facing doubt and skepticism. At a nearby table, Ryan Mitchell sat with Kevin Harrison and 2 other sailors, Jake Sullivan and Tom Brooks. They were talking about the new arrivals, specifically about Alina. "I heard she worked in operations at Norfolk," Kevin said. "That probably means she was doing computer work or something. Not real Navy work." "Great," Jake muttered. "So now we have to cover for her when she can't handle the actual physical stuff." Tom, who was slightly more diplomatic, said, "Maybe we should wait and see. You never know." "Come on, man," Ryan replied. "Look at her. She's tiny. When we need to haul ammunition or secure heavy equipment in rough seas, what's she going to do? We'll end up doing her work plus ours." Lieutenant Carter sat at the officers' table with 2 other junior officers. He wasn't participating in the negative talk, but he could hear it. The crew was already making up their minds about Alina Rodriguez before she had even done anything. It wasn't fair, but it was reality. The Navy was changing, becoming more inclusive, but old attitudes died hard. The next morning came early. At 05:30, the entire crew was awakened by the announcement over the ship's intercom system. Morning routines began immediately. Sailors stumbled out of their bunks, got dressed, and headed to their assigned stations. Alina was already awake when the announcement came. She had learned long ago that being early meant being prepared. She dressed quickly, made her bunk with precise military corners, and headed to the mess deck for breakfast. At 0600 hours sharp, she reported to Chief Webb for her duty assignment. He handed her a clipboard with a list of tasks. "You'll be working with the deck crew today," Marcus said. "We're doing inventory and maintenance on the forward storage compartments. It's physical work, lots of lifting and moving equipment. Think you can handle it?" There was a subtle challenge in his tone. Alina met his eyes steadily. "Yes, Chief. Good report to Petty Officer Mitchell on the forward deck. He'll tell you what needs to be done." Alina made her way to the forward deck, where Ryan Mitchell was overseeing a team of 4 sailors. They were already moving heavy crates and equipment, preparing for the day's work. The morning air was cool, and the sun was just beginning to rise over the ocean. Petty Officer Rodriguez reporting. "Sir," Alina said, approaching Ryan. Ryan looked her up and down, then pointed to a stack of crates. "We need to move those supplies to the storage compartment below. Each crate weighs about 60 pounds. Think you can manage?" It was another test, another challenge. Alina simply nodded. "Yes, sir." She walked over to the crates, bent her knees properly to protect her back, and lifted the first one. It was heavy, but she had lifted heavier things before. She carried it to the hatch leading below deck and carefully descended the ladder. Balancing the crate, the other sailors watched with barely concealed surprise. They had expected her to struggle, to ask for help, or to complain about the weight. Instead, she moved efficiently, her technique proper, her expression focused. Ryan felt a small flicker of respect but quickly pushed it aside. One crate didn't prove anything. Let's see how she does after 20 of them, he thought. For the next 2 hours, the team worked steadily. They moved crates, organized equipment, and performed routine maintenance checks. Alina worked alongside the men, never asking for special treatment, never complaining about the difficulty. She was slower than the larger men. That was unavoidable, given her size, but she was steady and consistent. Jake Sullivan found himself working next to her at one point. He was struggling with a particularly awkward piece of equipment, trying to maneuver it through a narrow hatch. Alina stepped in without being asked and helped guide it through from the other side. The teamwork made the job easier. Thanks, Jake said, slightly surprised. No problem, Alina replied. By mid-morning, the work was done. Ryan inspected everything, making sure it met Navy standards. He had to admit grudgingly that Alina had held her own. She hadn't been the strongest or the fastest, but she had done her share of the work without creating problems. But one morning of physical work didn't change the crew's overall opinion. In the minds of most sailors aboard the USS Guardian, Alina Rodriguez was still an unknown quantity, someone who would probably need extra help and consideration because of her size and gender. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to check, was Alina's actual background. They saw the rank insignia of a petty officer's second class and assumed it meant she had basic Navy experience. They saw her assignment from Norfolk and assumed she had worked a desk job. They didn't know that Alina Rodriguez had joined the Navy at 19 with a specific goal in mind. They didn't know that she had spent 3 years in some of the most demanding training the military had to offer. They didn't know that her operations work at Norfolk had been a temporary, administrative assignment after completing a classified mission overseas. Most importantly, they didn't know that Alina Rodriguez was a member of an elite unit, one of the most respected special operations groups in the entire United States military. She had trained with Navy SEALs, worked alongside special forces, and completed missions in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But she didn't wear any special insignia announcing this. Elite operators rarely did when they were on regular assignments. They blended in, kept quiet about their backgrounds, and only revealed their capabilities when absolutely necessary. Alina understood the doubt she faced. She had faced it her entire career. Being a small woman in the military meant constantly fighting against assumptions and stereotypes. But she had learned that actions spoke louder than words. Eventually, people would see what she was capable of. They always did. That afternoon, during a break, she stood alone on the deck, looking out at the ocean. The water was calm, a deep blue that stretched to the horizon. She thought about her journey to this point, all the obstacles she had overcome, all the people who had doubted her along the way. A seagull flew past, crying out as it searched for food. Alina smiled slightly. She had been dismissed before. She would be dismissed again. It didn't matter. She knew who she was and what she was capable of. Soon enough, so would everyone else on this ship. The USS Guardian had been at sea for 3 days when the routine began to settle in. Alina Rodriguez had been assigned to various duties around the ship, working with different teams, learning the specific procedures and protocols of this particular vessel. Each day brought new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself, though she rarely felt the need to prove anything to anyone. On the morning of the 4th day, she was assigned to work with the engineering team below deck. The engine room was hot, noisy, and cramped. Massive turbines powered the ship, creating a constant rumble that vibrated through the metal floors. The air smelled of oil and metal, and the temperature was at least 15 degrees warmer than the rest of the ship. Chief Engineer, Lieutenant Patricia Hayes, was a no-nonsense woman in her 30s who had been working on Navy ships for over a decade. She ran her engineering department with precision and expected excellence from everyone who worked under her. When Alina reported for duty, Patricia looked her over with an appraising eye. "Rodriguez right?" Patricia asked over the noise of the engines. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. We need someone to inspect the coolant lines on the starboard turbine. It's tight work. Lots of crawling through narrow spaces. You up for it?" "Yes, ma'am." Patricia handed her a flashlight and a clipboard with an inspection checklist. Take Seaman Morris with you. He'll show you where everything is. Check every connection, every valve. Look for any signs of wear or leakage. This is critical work. These engines keep us moving, and if the coolant system fails, we have serious problems. Alina followed Seaman Morris, a young sailor who had been on the ship for about 8 months, through a maze of pipes and machinery. The area around the turbine was indeed tight, with barely enough room to squeeze through in some places. For once, Alina's small size was an advantage. She could fit into spaces where larger sailors would struggle. You ever done engine work before? Maurice asked as they reached the inspection area. Some, Alina replied, which was true. During her various training programs, she had learned basic engineering and maintenance for ships, vehicles, and aircraft. Operators needed to understand how things worked in case they had to improvise repairs in the field. They worked for 2 hours, checking every line, testing every valve, documenting everything on the inspection sheet. The work was tedious and uncomfortable, but Alina remained focused. Morris was impressed by her thoroughness and attention to detail. When they returned to report their findings to Lieutenant Hayes, Patricia reviewed the inspection sheet carefully. "Clean work," she said, with approval. "No shortcuts, everything documented properly. Good job, Rodriguez." "Thank you, ma'am." As Alina left the engineering section, she passed by a group of sailors who were taking a break. Among them was Ryan Mitchell, who was surprised to see her emerge from the engine room looking tired but satisfied. "How is engine work?" Ryan asked, his tone slightly challenging. "Hot and noisy, but interesting," Alina replied simply. "Lieutenant Hayes is tough," Ryan continued. "She doesn't accept sloppy work. If she approved your inspection, that means something." Alina nodded but didn't elaborate. She had no interest in bragging or seeking validation. She simply did her job to the best of her ability, regardless of who was watching or what they thought. That evening, the ship's routine was interrupted by an announcement over the intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We have received orders to change course and proceed to a new location. This is not a drill. Prepare for potential operational activity. Department heads, report to the briefing room immediately." The atmosphere on the ship changed instantly. Sailors who had been relaxed became focused and alert. Conversations stopped. Everyone moved with purpose to their designated stations. Alina was in the mess hall when the announcement came. She set down her tray and headed to her assigned emergency station, which was on the main deck near the communications center. She didn't know what was happening, but she recognized the tone in the captain's voice. Something important was developing in the briefing room. Captain Richard Morrison stood before his senior officers and department heads. He was a seasoned commander in his 50s, with gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent most of his life at sea. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, looking around the room. "We've received intelligence about a cargo ship approximately 200 nautical miles from our current position. The vessel is believed to be transporting illegal weapons and possibly hostages. Naval intelligence suspects this is connected to a larger smuggling operation." He pressed a button, and a map appeared on the screen behind him. "We're the closest naval asset to the location. Our orders are to intercept the vessel, board if necessary, and assess the situation. If hostages are present, we may need to conduct a rescue operation." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the ship's executive officer, spoke up. "Do we have details on how many people are aboard the target vessel?" "Intelligence estimates between 10 and 15 individuals, possibly armed. The ship itself is a medium-sized cargo vessel, about 300 feet long. It's flying under a flag of convenience, registered in a country with lax maritime regulations," Chief Webb asked. "What's our tactical approach, sir?" "We'll approach under normal maritime protocols, identify ourselves, and request permission to board for a routine inspection. If they comply, we conduct a standard boarding procedure. If they refuse or show hostile intent, we escalate accordingly. We have authorization to use force if necessary to secure the vessel and any hostages." The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering every detail of the operation. When it concluded, officers dispersed to brief their respective teams and prepare the ship for action. On the main deck, sailors began preparing the boarding craft and checking weapons. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. This was what they trained for, the reason the Navy existed. Most of the crew felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Alina stood at her station, listening to the briefing being relayed through the communication system. She recognized the scenario immediately. This was the kind of operation she had trained for extensively. The kind of situation where her actual skills and experience would be most valuable. But she was just another crew member here, assigned to a support role during boarding operations. The actual boarding team would consist of the ship's security personnel and selected sailors with tactical training. Alina knew she wouldn't be selected for the boarding team. She was too new, and nobody knew her actual capabilities. Lieutenant Carter was chosen to lead the boarding team, along with Chief Webb and 8 other sailors, including Ryan Mitchell and Jake Sullivan. They assembled in the armory to receive their briefing and equipment. "This is straightforward," Daniel explained, standing before the team. "We approach in the rigid hull inflatable boat, come alongside their vessel, and board. Our primary objectives are to secure the vessel, ensure the safety of any hostages, and detain anyone involved in illegal activity. Rules of engagement are clear. We use minimum necessary force, but we are authorized to defend ourselves if fired upon." He looked at each team member. "Remember your training. Stay in formation, maintain communication, watch each other's backs. We do this by the book." The team nodded, their expressions serious. This was real. Bullets would be real. Danger would be real. As the USS Guardian approached the target vessel's location, the sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the water. The cargo ship came into view, a rust-colored vessel that looked old and poorly maintained. It was moving slowly, trailing a line of dark smoke from its exhaust. Captain Morrison attempted radio contact. "Unknown vessel? This is the United States Navy warship USS Guardian. Identify yourself and prepare to be boarded for inspection under international maritime law." There was no response initially. The cargo ship continued on its course, making no attempt to slow down or acknowledge the Navy vessel. Captain Morrison repeated the message twice more. Still no response. "They're not stopping, sir," the communications officer reported. Captain Morrison's expression hardened. "Fire a warning shot across their bow." The deck gun fired once, the shot landing in the water approximately 50 yards ahead of the cargo ship. The message was clear: stop or face consequences. Finally, a crackling voice came over the radio. The speaker had a heavy accent and sounded nervous. "This is cargo ship Northern Star. We are conducting legitimate business. We do not consent to boarding. Northern Star, you are in international waters and subject to inspection under maritime law. We have reason to believe you are engaged in illegal activity. Prepare to be boarded? This is not a request." There was a long pause, then the voice returned. "We will stop. Please do not shoot. We will stop." The cargo ship's engines slowed, and it began to drift. Captain Morrison nodded to Lieutenant Carter. "Board them. Be careful." The boarding team loaded into the rigid hull inflatable boat, their weapons ready but pointed down. The small boat's engines roared to life, and it raced across the water toward the cargo ship, which now sat dead in the water, rocking gently with the waves. As they approached the cargo ship's hull, the team could see rust and damage along the waterline. The vessel looked even worse up close, clearly not well maintained. A ladder hung down from the deck, apparently lowered to allow them to board. Lieutenant Carter went first, climbing the ladder with his weapons secured but ready. Chief Webb followed, then the rest of the team. They cleared the deck quickly, finding it empty. No crew members were visible. "This doesn't feel right," Ryan muttered quietly to Jake. "Stay alert," Daniel ordered. "Search the vessel. Teams of 2, standard search pattern." Back on the USS Guardian, Alina stood at her station, monitoring the situation through the ship's communication system. She could hear the boarding team's radio chatter as they searched the cargo ship. Something in their voices made her uneasy. She had developed an instinct for danger over years of operations, and that instinct was telling her something was wrong. The boarding team moved through the cargo ship systematically, checking compartments and corridors. They found the crew quarters empty. The bridge was abandoned. The engine room showed signs of recent use, but no personnel. "Where's everyone?" Jake wondered aloud. They descended into the cargo hold, weapons raised, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The hold was filled with crates and containers, stacked haphazardly, and then they saw them. 3 people tied up in the corner, their mouths gagged. Hostages. "We've got hostages," Lieutenant Carter reported over the radio. 3 individuals appear to be in decent condition, as Chief Webb and another sailor moved to free the hostages. Alina heard something through the communication system that made her blood run cold. Background noise? A sound that didn't belong. She had heard it before in hostile situations. The electronic chirp of a radio being activated. It was a trap. On the cargo ship, Daniel was beginning to realize the same thing. The abandoned vessel, the conveniently lowered ladder, the hostages placed exactly where they would be found. This was too easy, too convenient. "Everyone out now," he shouted. "It's a trap. Move." But before anyone could react, armed men emerged from hidden compartments throughout the ship. They had been waiting, concealed, preparing their ambush. The boarding team found themselves surrounded, outnumbered and outgunned. Gunfire erupted. The boarding team took cover behind crates and equipment, returning fire, but they were pinned down. One sailor, Tom Brooks, took a bullet in his leg and went down screaming. The situation had gone from bad to catastrophic in seconds. On the USS Guardian, Captain Morrison listened to the chaos unfolding through the radio. "They're pinned down," he said grimly. "We need to extract them immediately. But if we approach, we'll be in range of whatever weapons they have. You could provide covering fire from here," Lieutenant Commander Chen suggested, "but at this range, we risk hitting our own people." Captain Morrison's mind raced through options, all of them bad. His boarding team was trapped on a hostile vessel taking fire, and every second they remained there increased the likelihood of casualties. Alina stepped forward from her station. "Sir, request permission to speak." Captain Morrison turned, surprised. He barely knew the sailor. "What is it, petty officer?" "Sir, I have tactical experience in this type of situation. I can help." "What kind of tactical experience?" Captain Morrison asked, his patience wearing thin. He didn't have time for this. Alina met his eyes steadily. "Sir, I'm qualified in close-quarters combat, hostage rescue, and maritime operations. I can assist in extracting the boarding team." Something in her voice, in her posture, made Captain Morrison pause. This wasn't bravado or foolish bravery. This was confidence based on experience. "What's your background, Rodriguez?" he asked. "Sir, I'm assigned to Naval Special Warfare Development Group." The briefing room went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Naval Special Warfare Development Group was the official name for SEAL Team 6, the most elite special operations unit in the Navy. The team that had conducted the raid on Osama bin Laden, this small, quiet woman who had been dismissed by half the crew, was a Navy SEAL. The briefing room remained frozen in shock. Captain Morrison stared at Alina Rodriguez, processing what she had just revealed. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, SEAL Team 6. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. "You're SEAL." Lieutenant Commander Chen said, her voice filled with disbelief. Women had only recently been allowed into SEAL training, and the few who had attempted it were the subject of intense scrutiny and discussion throughout the Navy. "Yes, ma'am," Alina replied calmly. "I completed BUD-S training 3 years ago, followed by SEAL qualification training and advanced tactical courses. I've been operational for 26 months. Chief Webb, who had been standing near the door, felt his face flush with embarrassment. He had spent the last 4 days treating her like she was barely capable of basic ship duties, when in reality, she was one of the most highly trained warriors in the entire military, Captain. Morrison's shock quickly transformed into tactical thinking. If Rodriguez was telling the truth, and he had no reason to doubt her, then she represented their best chance of saving the boarding team. "Why are you on my ship?" he asked. "SEALs don't typically serve on surface vessels unless there's a specific reason." "I'm between deployments, sir. After my last operation, Command assigned me temporary duty on a regular vessel as part of a rotation." It's standard protocol for operators to maintain familiarity with conventional Navy operations. The radio crackled with more gunfire and shouting. Tom Brooks was screaming in pain. Lieutenant Carter was trying to coordinate his team's defense, but they were outnumbered and outpositioned. Time was running out. "What do you need?" Captain Morrison asked Alina, making his decision. "For volunteers who can follow orders without question, night vision equipment, suppressed weapons. It's one of the ship's rigid hull inflatable boats. I'll need 15 minutes to brief the team and prepare. You'll have it. Commander Chen, get her whatever she needs. Webb, gather 4 of our best sailors and send them to the armory immediately." As Alina left the briefing room with Lieutenant Commander Chen, Captain Morrison activated the radio. "Lieutenant Carter, this is the captain. Help is coming. Hold your position and minimize exposure. 15 minutes. "Roger that, sir," Daniel's strained voice replied. "We'll hold." In the armory, Alina quickly assessed the available equipment. She selected a suppressed rifle, a sidearm, tactical vest, and necessary ammunition. She moved with practiced efficiency, checking every piece of gear automatically. Her hands moving through procedures she had performed thousands of times. Chief Webb arrived with 4 sailors: Ryan Mitchell, Jake Sullivan, and 2 others named David Park and Lisa Martinez. All were young, fit, and had scored high in tactical training, but all of them looked confused and uncertain. "Listen up," Alina said, her voice taking on a tone of command that none of them had heard before. "I'm going to brief you once, and I need you to understand and execute without question. The boarding team is pinned down on that cargo ship. We have approximately 12 minutes before their tactical position becomes untenable. We're going to insert, neutralize the hostiles, and extract our people." Ryan started to speak. "But how are we no questions right now?" Alina cut him off firmly. "Questions waste time, and our people are dying. You'll follow my orders exactly. When I say move, you move. When I say stop, you freeze. When I say shoot, you fire. Understood?" The 4 sailors exchanged glances, still processing the fact that this small woman they had dismissed was now giving them orders. But the authority in her voice was undeniable. This wasn't someone playing soldier. This was a professional operator. "Understood," they replied in unison. "Good, here's the plan." Lena pulled up a schematic of the cargo ship on a tablet. "The boarding team is pinned in the forward cargo hold. The hostiles are positioned here, here, and here, based on the gunfire patterns I heard over the radio. We're going to approach from the stern, which they won't expect because it's the most difficult boarding point. We'll climb up, move through the engine room, and come up behind their positions." She pointed to each location on the schematic. "Park and Martinez, you'll provide covering fire from elevated positions once we're aboard. Mitchell and Sullivan, you're with me on the assault team. We move fast, we move quiet, and we move as a unit. The goal is to neutralize threats and extract our team. Nothing fancy, just efficient execution." Jake Sullivan found his voice. "What if they have more people than we expect?" "Then we adapt," Alina replied simply. "Combat never goes exactly as planned. But if we stay focused and work together, we can handle whatever we find. Remember, speed, surprise, and violence of action. Those are our advantages." She looked at each of them. "I know this is sudden. I know you weren't expecting this. But I've done this type of operation dozens of times. Trust me, follow my lead, and we'll bring everyone home." Ryan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't the quiet sailor who had been doing routine ship duties for the past few days. This was someone completely different. Someone who radiated competence and confidence. He found himself believing her, trusting her, despite having known her for less than a week. "We're ready," he said, and the others nodded. They loaded into the rigid hull inflatable boat under cover of darkness. The sun had fully set now, and the ocean was dark except for the lights from both vessels. Alina piloted the boat herself, navigating around to the stern of the cargo ship where the hull rose higher out of the water. The approach was tricky. The stern had no ladder, no easy boarding point. But that was exactly why Alina had chosen it. The hostiles would be watching the areas where they expected another rescue attempt. Alina produced a grappling hook and rope from her equipment. She threw it up to the railing with practiced ease, the hook catching on the first try. She tested the rope, then looked at her team. "Mitchell, you're first after me. Then Sullivan, Park, and Martinez. Move quickly, but quietly. When you reach the top, spread out and maintain security." She began climbing the rope hand over hand, making it look effortless despite the weight of her equipment. Her small size and upper body strength, developed through years of intense training, made the climb manageable. She reached the deck, swept the area with her weapon, then signaled for the others to follow. Ryan climbed next, his arms burning from the effort. He wasn't as fast as Alina, but he made it. One by one, the team assembled on the stern deck, breathing hard but ready. Alina led them into the ship's interior. Moving through the narrow corridors with her weapon raised, checking corners, clearing rooms, her movements were smooth and efficient, completely different from how she had moved during routine ship duties. This was her natural environment. This was what she was built for. They could hear gunfire ahead coming from the direction of the cargo hold. Alina signaled for Park and Martinez to take positions on a catwalk that overlooked the hold. They would provide covering fire when needed. Then she, Ryan, and Jake continued forward. In the cargo hold, Lieutenant Carter and his team were in desperate straits. They had been pinned down for nearly 20 minutes. Tom Brooks had lost a significant amount of blood from his leg wound. Their ammunition was running low. The hostiles were slowly closing in, using the stacked crates for cover as they advanced. "We can't hold much longer," Chief Webb said grimly, reloading his weapon with one of his last magazines. "Help is coming," Daniel replied, though he wasn't sure what help could possibly arrive in time or how it could make a difference. Alina reached a position behind the hostiles' main group. Through her night vision goggles, she could see 7 armed men advancing on the boarding team's position. 2 more were positioned as rear guard, watching the main entrance to the hold. She signaled to Ryan and Jake, 2 targets each, on her mark. They nodded, sighting through their weapons. Alina lined up her shot on the nearest hostile, controlling her breathing, waiting for the perfect moment. She fired. The suppressed rifle made a soft coughing sound, barely audible over the ongoing gunfire. The hostile dropped instantly, dead before he hit the ground. Ryan and Jake fired simultaneously, taking down 2 more. The element of surprise was total and devastating. The remaining hostiles spun around, confused and panicked, trying to understand where the new threat was coming from. Park and Martinez opened fire from their elevated position, their shots precise and controlled. 3 more hostiles went down in seconds. Alina moved forward aggressively, her weapon up, engaging the last 2 hostiles who were trying to take cover. She fired twice, center mass shots that ended the threats immediately. The entire engagement had lasted less than 15 seconds. "Friendlies coming in?" Alina called out. "Boarding team, hold your fire." Lieutenant Carter looked up from behind his cover, stunned. A moment ago, they had been surrounded and facing certain death. Now, the hostiles were down, and a rescue team was approaching. But who? Alina stepped into view, her weapons still raised and ready. "Lieutenant Carter, we need to move now. More hostiles could arrive any moment. Can your wounded move?" Daniel stared at her, recognition slowly dawning. "Rodriguez, that's you?" "Yes, sir. We need to extract immediately." "Can Brooks walk?" "Negative. He needs to be carried." "Sullivan, Mitchell, get him up. I'll take point." "Lieutenant Carter, gather your team and follow me. Move fast, stay tight." Ryan and Jake lifted Tom Brooks between them, supporting his weight. The injured sailor groaned in pain but stayed conscious. The boarding team, exhausted and shocked, followed Alina as she led them out of the cargo hold. They moved quickly through the ship, retracing the route Alina had taken to get in. Park and Martinez covered their retreat, ensuring no hostiles followed. When they reached the stern, Alina supervised the evacuation, sending the wounded down first, using a rope harness she had prepared. One by one, the boarding team descended to the waiting boat. Alina was the last one off the ship, covering their retreat until everyone was safe. Only when the boat pushed away from the cargo ship did she lower her weapon. The ride back to the USS Guardian was silent except for the engine noise and the waves. Tom Brooks received first aid from Martinez, who had medical training. The others simply sat, processing what had just happened. Lieutenant Carter looked at Alina, who sat calmly in the boat as if she had just finished a routine drill rather than a combat rescue operation. "You're a SEAL," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Didn't seem relevant, sir? I was assigned to routine ship duties. I did those duties." Ryan found his voice. "We treated you like you didn't know anything. We doubted you, questioned whether you could handle basic ship work. And the whole time you were a trained operator," Alina finished. "I know. It's okay. People make assumptions. It happens." "It's not okay," Chief Webb said, his voice heavy with regret. "We judged you based on your appearance, your gender. We never gave you a chance. And you just saved all our lives." "Would have done the same for me," Alina replied simply. When they reached the USS Guardian, medical teams were waiting on deck to receive the wounded. Captain Morrison stood at the railing, watching as the boat pulled alongside. His boarding team was alive thanks to the small woman who everyone had dismissed. As Alina climbed aboard, Captain Morrison saluted her. It was an unusual gesture, an officer saluting an enlisted sailor, but he felt it was appropriate given what she had just done. "Outstanding work, Petty Officer Rodriguez. You saved my boarding team and completed an exceptionally difficult combat rescue." Lena returned the salute. "Just doing my job, sir." That was considerably more than just a job. That was exceptional skill and courage under fire. He paused. "Why didn't you identify yourself as a SEAL when you first came aboard?" "Sir, I wasn't here as a SEAL. I was here as a regular crew member. My orders were to serve normally unless a situation arose where my specific skills were needed. That situation arose, so I acted." Captain Morrison nodded slowly, understanding. "The crew needs to know who you are, what you are." "With respect, sir, I'd prefer they just know I'm a sailor, same as them. The SEAL thing is just a job, like any other rating in the Navy. But it was too late for that." Word had already spread throughout the ship like wildfire. The small woman everyone had doubted was a Navy SEAL who had just conducted a combat rescue operation and saved 8 lives. By morning, every sailor on the USS Guardian would know the truth. The sun rose over the USS Guardian the next morning, casting golden light across the deck. The ship was buzzing with activity and conversation, but the topic was singular: Petty Officer Alina Rodriguez. Stories were being told and retold, each version adding more drama to what had already been a remarkable rescue operation. In the mess hall, sailors who had never spoken to Alina now claimed they had suspected she was special all along. Others admitted their prejudice openly, expressing amazement and embarrassment at how wrong they had been. The entire culture of the ship had shifted overnight. Alina herself was in the medical bay, having her hands looked at by the ship's doctor. Rope burns and minor abrasions from the climb were being treated with antiseptic and bandages. "Lieutenant?" Carter sat on the next bed over, waiting to have his own minor injuries assessed. "How's Brooks doing?" Alina asked the doctor. "He'll make a full recovery," Dr. Williams replied. "The bullet went through muscle tissue without hitting bone or major arteries. He was lucky. Another few inches to the left, and it would have been a very different story." Alina nodded, relieved. Combat operations always carried risk, but bringing everyone home alive was the best possible outcome. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said once the doctor had moved on to check on other patients. "Of course, sir." "Did you go through SEAL training?" It's the hardest military training in the world. The dropout rate is over 75%. Most men can't complete it. "What made you decide to attempt it?" Lena considered the question carefully. "I joined the Navy because I wanted to serve at the highest level, to be in situations where I could make a real difference. When they opened SEAL training to women, I saw it as an opportunity. Not to prove anything about gender or politics, just to challenge myself and develop skills that could help save lives." "What was the training like?" Daniel asked. He knew that reputation of Bud S. training, but hearing from someone who had actually completed it was different. "Brutal," Alina said honestly. "Physical demands are extreme. Hell Week almost broke me. 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. Cold water, heavy boats, constant movement. My body was shutting down. I was hallucinating from exhaustion. There were moments when I wanted to quit so badly I could barely think of anything else. But you didn't quit." No, because I kept reminding myself why I started. Every time I wanted to ring the bell and drop out, I thought about the people I could help if I made it through. The hostages I could rescue, the teammates I could support, the missions I could complete. That purpose kept me going when nothing else could. Daniel felt deep respect for her. He had considered trying out for SEAL training when he was younger, but had ultimately decided he wasn't physically or mentally prepared for that level of intensity. Hearing about it from someone who had succeeded gave him a new appreciation for just how difficult it was. What happened after Bud S? He asked. SEAL qualification training, which is another 6 months of advanced tactical instruction. Then I was assigned to a team and began working real operations. I've done 3 deployments over the past 2 years. Counterterrorism work mostly, some intelligence gathering, 1 hostage rescue in Syria. Syria. That must have been intense. Lena nodded. It was complicated. Away, but we got the hostages out, and that's what mattered. Ryan Mitchell appeared in the doorway of the medical bay, looking hesitant. Sir, Rodriguez, sorry to interrupt. Captain Morrison wants to see both of you in his office. They followed Ryan through the ship's corridors. Sailors they passed stopped what they were doing to watch Alina walk by. Some nodded respectfully. Others stared in open amazement. Alina kept her expression neutral and professional. Not enjoying the attention, but understanding it was unavoidable. Captain Morrison's office was more spacious than Alina expected. With nautical charts on the walls and a large wooden desk covered with reports and navigation equipment. The captain stood when they entered, along with Lieutenant Commander Chen and Chief Webb. Petty Officer Rodriguez, Lieutenant Carter, thank you for coming, Captain Morrison began. Please, sit down. They sat in the chairs facing his desk. Captain Morrison remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back in a typical naval officer pose. I've spent the past few hours compiling reports about yesterday's incident and communicating with Naval Special Warfare Command about your presence on this ship, Rodriguez. Your commanding officer, Commander Patterson, sends his regards and informed me that you're due to return to your unit in 2 weeks. Yes, sir, Alina confirmed. He also mentioned that your actions yesterday were entirely consistent with your training and previous operational performance. He seemed unsurprised that you successfully conducted a solo-led rescue operation. Captain Morrison smiled slightly. He said, and I quote, Rodriguez is one of our best. If anyone was going to pull off a miracle, it would be her. Alina felt a flush of pride, but kept her expression professional. Commander Patterson was not a man who gave praise lightly. Earning his respect had been one of her proudest achievements. Sir, I need to express my regret, Chief Webb interjected. I was Elena's initial point of contact when she came aboard, and I completely failed to recognize her capabilities. I treated her like an inexperienced sailor, gave her menial assignments, and never bothered to actually review her full service record. That's on me. Captain Morrison looked at Marcus thoughtfully. Chief, you're not alone in that. Half this crew made the same assumptions. The question is, what do we learn from it? That we judge people by their actions and qualifications, not by our preconceptions, Marcus replied. And that we need to look deeper than surface appearances. Exactly right, Captain Morrison agreed. He turned to Alina. Rodriguez, I want to apologize on behalf of this entire crew. You came aboard this ship and were subjected to doubt and dismissal because of your size and gender. That was wrong, and it reflects poorly on our culture and training. Sir, with respect, I don't need an apology, Alina said. I've faced doubt my entire career. What matters is that when the situation required it, the crew trusted me enough to follow my lead. Mitchell, Sullivan, Park, and Martinez performed excellently under pressure. They adapted quickly and executed the mission without hesitation. That speaks well of the crew. Ryan, who was standing near the door, felt a surge of respect. Even now, after proving herself so dramatically, Alina was deflecting credit and focusing on the team's performance rather than her own achievements. You're generous, Captain Morrison said. But the lesson stands. This crew, myself included, needs to examine our biases and do better. He picked up a file from his desk. I'm putting you in for a Navy Commendation Medal for your actions yesterday. You planned and executed a combat rescue operation with minimal resources and no preparation time, resulting in 0 friendly casualties. That deserves recognition. Thank you, sir, but that's not necessary. I was doing my job. Perhaps, but excellence should be acknowledged. The medal will be awarded. Captain Morrison's tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. In the meantime, for your remaining 2 weeks aboard this vessel, I'm assigning you to work with our tactical teams. Help us improve our boarding procedures, close quarters combat training, and crisis response protocols. Use your expertise to make this crew better. I'd be happy to do that, sir. Over the following days, Alina became the most sought-after instructor on the ship. She conducted training sessions on tactical movement, weapon handling, and crisis decision-making. Sailors who had dismissed her a week ago now hung on her every word, taking notes and asking questions. The training was intense but educational. Lena demonstrated techniques that most of them had never seen before. She showed them how to clear rooms efficiently, how to move as a coordinated unit, and how to assess threats quickly in chaotic situations. During one training session, she was demonstrating hand-to-hand combat techniques with Ryan Mitchell as her volunteer partner. Ryan was 6 feet tall and outweighed her by 70 pounds. But Alina systematically showed the assembled sailors how technique and leverage could overcome size advantages. Size matters in a fight, Alina explained as she demonstrated a disarm technique on Ryan, but it's not the only factor.
Technique, speed, and decisiveness often matter more.
A smaller fighter who knows what they're doing can defeat a larger opponent who doesn't. She demonstrated, and Ryan found himself on the mat before he fully understood what had happened. The watching sailors murmured in amazement. The key is not to fight strength against strength, Alina continued. Use your opponent's momentum against them. Redirect their force rather than opposing it directly. It's basic physics applied to combat. Jake Sullivan raised his hand. How do you stay calm in combat situations? Yesterday, when we were boarding that cargo ship, you seemed completely relaxed, even though we were going into a firefight. Alina considered the question carefully. It's not that I don't feel fear. I do. Everyone does. But fear can be managed through training and experience. When you've drilled procedures thousands of times, they become automatic. Your body knows what to do even when your mind is dealing with fear. That's why we train so hard in the SEALs. We want muscle memory to take over in crisis situations. But what about the mental aspect? Another sailor asked. How do you keep your head clear? Focus on the mission, not the danger, Alina replied. In yesterday's operation, I wasn't thinking about getting shot or what could go wrong. I was thinking about each step of the plan. Approach the ship, infiltrate undetected, position the team, neutralize threats, extract our people. Breaking it down into manageable steps makes it less overwhelming. The questions continued for another hour. Alina answered each one thoroughly, sharing knowledge that came from years of the most elite training available. The sailors absorbed everything eagerly, recognizing this as a rare opportunity to learn from an actual special operations professional. In the evenings, the atmosphere in the mess hall changed dramatically. Alina was no longer sitting alone. She was surrounded by sailors wanting to hear her stories, though she was careful not to reveal classified information. She talked about training, about the challenges of BUD-S, about the importance of teamwork and trust. David Park, who had been part of the rescue team, asked her one evening, "What was going through your mind when you volunteered to lead the rescue? You barely knew us. We had treated you like you were just another regular sailor. Why risk your life for us?" Alina looked at him seriously. Because that's what we do in the Navy. We're a team, a family. It doesn't matter if someone doubted me or underestimated me. When sailors are in danger, we help them, period. That's not conditional on whether they were nice to me or recognized my abilities. But you could have just told everyone you were a SEAL from the beginning, David continued. Then nobody would have doubted you. Maybe, Alina acknowledged. But I've learned that who you are matters more than what you tell people you are. If I had shown up announcing my SEAL credentials, some people would have been skeptical, thinking I was bragging or trying to get special treatment. By just doing my job quietly, I got to see people's true characters. And when the crisis came, I got to see who could adapt and perform under pressure. You all did great, by the way. Lieutenant Patricia Hayes, the chief engineer, joined their table. Rodriguez, I wanted to thank you personally. Tom Brooks is in my department. He's a good kid, has a family back home. If you hadn't acted when you did, he probably wouldn't have made it. I'm glad he's okay, Alina replied. But remember, it was a team effort. Park and Martinez's covering fire was essential. Mitchell and Sullivan executed perfectly under pressure. Carter and Webb kept the boarding team together when they were pinned down. Everyone played a part. You're very humble for someone who could brag about being in the most elite unit in the military, Patricia observed. Alina smiled. And the team's ego gets people killed. We're trained to focus on the mission and the team, not on personal glory. The best operators are the ones who do their job quietly and efficiently without needing recognition. As Elena's time on the USS Guardian drew to a close, Captain Morrison organized a small ceremony on the deck. The entire crew was assembled, and Alina stood at attention before them, wearing her dress uniform with her seal trident pin visible above her ribbons. Captain Morrison addressed the crew. 2 weeks ago, Petty Officer Elena Rodriguez came aboard this ship. Many of us, myself included, made assumptions about her based on her appearance. We didn't see her qualifications, her training, or her experience. We saw only what we expected to see. He paused, looking around at the assembled sailors. Rodriguez taught us an important lesson about judgment and perception. But more than that, she demonstrated the values that make the Navy great: courage, competence, and commitment to the team. She didn't need to tell us who she was. She showed us through her actions. He turned to Alina and presented her with the Navy Commendation Medal. Exceptionally meritorious service, and 4. Heroism in combat operations resulting in the successful rescue of 8 personnel under hostile fire. Your actions reflect great credit upon yourself and the United States Navy. Alina saluted crisply as the medal was pinned to her uniform. The crew erupted in applause, genuine and heartfelt. These were sailors who had learned to see beyond their preconceptions, who had witnessed excellence firsthand, and who now understood that capability came in many forms. After the ceremony, sailors lined up to shake Elena's hand and say goodbye. Ryan Mitchell approached, looking somewhat embarrassed. I need to say this, Ryan began. That first day in the locker room before you arrived, some of us were talking. We made jokes about having a female sailor assigned to the ship. We said some pretty ignorant things. I'm ashamed of that now. I know, Alina said simply. Private Chen told me about it when I first came aboard. Ryan looked surprised. You knew? This whole time? Yes, but I also knew that people's opinions can change when given evidence. You followed my lead during the rescue without hesitation. You trusted me when it mattered most. That's what counts. Still, I'm sorry. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Elena shook his hand. Apology accepted. Just remember this feeling the next time you meet someone new. Don't assume. Look deeper. Jake Sullivan was next. You changed my perspective on a lot of things. I thought I understood what it meant to be a sailor, but you showed me a whole different level. Thank you for that. You're welcome. But remember, being a SEAL is just one path in the Navy. Every rating, every job is important. The cooks who feed us, the engineers who keep the ship running, the communications specialists who keep us connected, all of it matters. Excellence can exist in any role. Chief Webb approached last, his expression serious. Rodriguez, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you respect, which I should have given from the beginning. You're an exceptional sailor and an exceptional person. I'll never make the same mistake again. We're good, Chief, Alina said warmly. Use this experience to mentor the next generation. Teach them to look beyond surface appearances and judge people by their character and capabilities. I promise you that. The transport boat arrived to take Alina back to shore, where she would catch a flight to her next assignment. As she prepared to leave the USS Guardian, she stood at the railing one last time, looking out at the vast ocean. Lieutenant Carter joined her. Any final wisdom for us before you go? Alina thought for a moment. Just this. Every person you meet has a story, has capabilities you might not immediately see. Take the time to know people before you judge them. You might be surprised by what you discover. We certainly were surprised by you. That was the point, Alina said with a small smile. Sometimes the most powerful lessons are the ones we learn through experience rather than lectures. She picked up her duffel bag, saluted Captain Morrison one final time, and climbed down into the transport boat. As it pulled away from the USS Guardian, she looked back at the crew assembled on deck, all of them waving goodbye. She raised her hand in return, a simple gesture of respect and farewell. The boat carried her across the water toward shore, toward her next assignment, toward whatever challenges lay ahead. But she left behind a ship full of sailors who had learned an invaluable lesson about judgment, about capability, and about the importance of looking beyond assumptions to see the truth. Years later, Ryan Mitchell would tell the story to new recruits joining his unit. He would talk about the small woman who came aboard their ship and was dismissed by everyone, only to reveal herself as one of the most elite warriors in the military. He would use it as a teaching moment about prejudice and perception. Jake Sullivan would go on to complete his own officer training and eventually command his own vessel. He would implement training programs focused on unconscious bias and the importance of evaluating people based on merit rather than assumptions. Chief Webb would become one of the most respected senior enlisted leaders in the Navy, known for his mentorship and his insistence that every sailor be given a fair opportunity to prove themselves, regardless of background or appearance. And Alina Rodriguez would continue her career with the SEALs, completing dozens more missions, training countless operators, quietly demonstrating excellence in every assignment she received. She never sought recognition or fame. She simply did her job, helped her teammates, and served her country with distinction. The story of her time aboard the USS Guardian became something of a legend in Navy circles. Not because of the dramatic rescue, though, that was impressive, but because it represented a fundamental truth that the military and society as a whole was still learning. Excellence knows no gender, no size, no preconceived limitation. It exists in people who dedicate themselves to mastery, who push beyond what others think is possible, and who prove through action what words could never convey. The sailors of the USS Guardian learned that lesson in the most powerful way possible, by witnessing it firsthand, by being rescued by it, by being taught by it. And they carried that lesson with them for the rest of their careers, passing it on to the next generation, ensuring that the legacy of Petty Officer Alina Rodriguez extended far beyond that single rescue operation. Sometimes the greatest teachers are the ones who never intended to teach at all. They simply lived their values, demonstrated their capabilities, and let their actions speak louder than any words ever could. Alina Rodriguez was one of those teachers, and the USS Guardian was forever changed by her presence.